Hi Soulmate, welcome back to my channel. It's Needles by Tiara here. In today's tutorial, I'll be teaching you how to sew a perfect short pencil skirt as displayed on the thumbnail. So on our last video, we learned how to draft and cut this perfect short pencil skirt with a butt lift contour. So if you have not seen or watched the drafting and the cutting part of this short perfect pencil skirt, I am going to be leaving the link on the description box down below. Please do ensure to check it out before you come back here to watch the sewing part of this perfect short pencil skirt with a butt lift contour. So for my required materials, I am going to be needing my well drafted pattern, which is what you're seeing at this point. So like I said earlier on, I am going to be leaving the link to the drafting and the cutting part of this short perfect pencil skirt on the description box down below. So next on the required material, you are going to be needing your fabric, which happens to be my Ankara fabric. So I am going to be using this Ankara fabric. You're going to be needing your matching lining, which is exactly what you're seeing here, a matching color of thread, and you're going to be needing your head stay, which is exactly what you're seeing at this point. So these are all the required materials that you're going to be needing for the sewing of your beautiful short pencil skirt with a butt lift contour. So without no further ado, let's dive right into it. So at this point, we're going to use both our Ankara fabric and our lining. We're going to place our pattern and trace it out. So we've gone ahead to place our pattern on top of both our Ankara fabric and our lining, and we've gone ahead to add all the basic required sewing allowances. So remember, on our pattern, we didn't add any allowance. So on this part, I did added a 2 inches allowance, which happens to be the butt lift part of our pencil skirt. So like I said earlier on, I did imputed 2 inches all the way around, following the curves that we have on the pattern. So it is very important and crucial that you must follow your butt lift contour curve at that point. So on the side seam of my back pattern, I went ahead to impute 2 inches as well, and I took it all the way around. So 2 inches on both the zipper and the side seam, and at this point we did imputed 0.5 inch all the way around on our waist region. So on the full length of our skirt, remembered while we were drafting, we did imputed a 2 inches skirt folding allowance at that point. Hence the reason why we are not going to be adding any allowance at that point. Now to our front pattern, remember, like I said, your pattern has to be on fold. So my fashion fabric is on fold and my lining is on fold at that point. Now on the side seam of my front pattern, I did imputed that same sewing allowance, which is 2 inches all the way round. And now at the waist region as well, I did imputed 0.5 inch all the way around at that point. So like I said earlier on, we've gone ahead to trace out both our fashion fabric and our lining, which is exactly what you're seeing at this point. So we did that for both our front pattern and our back pattern. I hope you understand. So moving on, we're going to go ahead to notch our darts. Remember, we're going to be imputing a dart for this skirt. So we're going to be taking note of that dart line, which is exactly what I'm trying to do at this point. So just go ahead to fold your pattern into 2 this way. Fold your fashion fabric and lining, following the midpoint of that line that you have imputed on your pattern. I hope you understand. So go in with your scissors and make a notch at that point. So that would definitely serve as a guide once you take off your pattern at that point. I hope you understand. Now to the front pattern as well, we're going to go ahead to notch the midpoint of our dart line, which is basically what I'm doing. Fold your fabric into 2 and go ahead to make a notch at that point. Having done that, please take note, you're going to be notching your back pattern, which happens to be the butt lift contour that you have imputed at the zipper allowance point. So you'd have to notch that point so that you do not get it mixed up. I hope you understand. So please just go ahead to fold that point and go ahead to make your notches. Now proceed on to take off all your pins, which is exactly what I'm doing at this point. Now we'd go ahead to take off our pattern, which is basically this. Now moving on, we're going to be taking note of the following. We have the waist region and the full skirt length of our skirt. So at the full skirt length of your skirt, which is this point, remember on that point we did imputed 2 inches, which is going to serve as our skirt folding allowance. So I am going to highlight that point by chalking it down, which is basically what I'm doing. go ahead to connect those points into each other. Now for the front pattern as well, go ahead to take off your 2 inches basic sewing folding allowance rather you did imputed on your skirt, so which is basically what I'm doing at this point. Now having done that, as a beginner I need you to pay attention. Now go ahead to fold that 2 inches. You're going to be folding it on your fashion fabric and not your lining. Go ahead to take off that 2 inches by folding it on your fashion fabric, which is exactly what I'm doing at this point. Now having done that, remember like I said earlier on, we have a folding allowance of 2 inches at that point, both for our fashion fabric and our lining. So we'd have to go ahead to take off that folding allowance from our lining. So to do that, instead of taking out 2 inches, you're going to be subtracting 1.5 inches off from your lining, so that by the time you use your 0.5 inch, which is the leftover sewing allowance, joining it with both your fashion fabric and your lining would definitely, accommodate the whole 2 inches, which happens to be our folding allowance for our skirt. I hope you understand. But before we do that, let's go ahead to replicate that same process for our front pattern. Please go ahead to fold your 2 inches on your fashion fabric this way. Now having done that, like I said earlier on, instead of taking out 2 inches, go ahead to chalk down 1.5 inches on your lining and take it all the way around this way. Go ahead to connect all those points into each other, which is this. Now for your front pattern as well, please go ahead to take off 1.5 inches, just chalk it down on your lining and take it gradually all the way round. So go ahead to connect it into each other this way. Having done that, you'd have to go ahead to take off that 1.5 inches from your lining. So please kindly take note, you are eliminating 1.5 inches off from your lining and not your fashion fabric. I hope you understand. That was the more reason why we did folded our fashion fabric, so you'd know that you're going to be taking off the 1.5 inches from your lining. I hope you understand. So keeping our fashion fabric aside, now for our front lining, would go ahead to replicate that same process. Take off your 1.5 inches folding allowance this way. So with that being done, this is what your fashion fabric and your lining is definitely going to look like. So our lining has been shortened by 1.5 inches, and this is influenced by the fact that by the time we join our skirt, we want that 2 inches which we did imputed as our skirt folding allowance to be on the inside. So by that I mean we want the fashion fabric to look as though it's the lining that we use for the inside, except for the fact that once you flip it to the right hand side, the wrong hand side rather, you most definitely see that we used a lining at that point, which is not the fashion fabric. Now moving on, we're going to be imputing our dart at this point. So like I said earlier on, the 2 inches is not going to be taken off from your fashion fabric, but rather from your lining. I hope you understand. Remember on our pattern, we did imputed our basic skirt dart. So we're going to be transferring the dart that we have exactly imputed on our pattern paper into our fashion fabric. So just like we did earlier on, we divided our nipple to nipple by 2, chalked it down. For the length of our dart, we came down by 5 inches. Now to impute our dart width, we divided 1 inch into 2, which was 0.5 inch on both sides, and we connected it all the way down to the 5 inch dart length. So now we're going to be replicating that same process on our fashion fabric. We're going to be transferring exactly what we did on our pattern into our fashion fabric. So let's go ahead to do that together. So now remember that we did notch the dart points at those points. That was the reason why I said you should take note of the midpoint of your dart, so that once you transfer this into your fashion fabric, it will be very easy, and that point right there is going to serve as a guide. I hope you understand. So now opening up from the wrong side of my fashion fabric, take note, you're going to place your tape from that point, which is your waist point, and you're going to be chalking down 5 inches. But remember I did added 0.5 inch for my skirt joining allowance, so I'm going to be chalking down 5.5 inches instead of 5 inches at that point. I hope you understand. So now we're going with our chalk, and we're going to be connecting that point into a straight line this way. Now for the other part of our skirt, we're going to be replicating that same process. Go ahead to place your tape from your waist point and chalk down 5.5 inches and not 5 inches, because we have in total 5 inches plus 0.5 inch for our skirt joining allowance, hence the reason for the 5.5 inches and not 5 inches. I hope you understand. Having imputed our dart line, now we're going to impute our dart tightening. Remember, the total dart tightening is 1 inch, so we're going to divide that 1 inch into 2, which will be 0.5 inch on both sides. So we're going to mark 0.5 inch on both sides of that dart leg, which is exactly what I'm doing at this point. Now for the right hand side, we'd go ahead to replicate that same process as well. Go ahead to chalk down 0.5 inch on both sides. Having done that, we'd go in with our straight ruler and we're going to connect from that 0.5 inch down to our dart length of 5.5 inches at that point. I hope you understand. So please basically just watch what I'm doing and do go ahead to replicate same for yours. So having done that for this part of our darts, now we'd go ahead to replicate that same process on these other parts as well. So please kindly pay attention and do go ahead to replicate same for yours as well. So with this being done, we've successfully transferred our dart from our pattern into our fashion fabric. So we're going to keep the front pattern aside while we go ahead to encase that same dart input on our back pattern. So we're going to be doing that for all the parts, including the lining as well. So as you can see, we've successfully transferred our darts to every part of our fashion fabric, both for the lining and the fashion fabric itself. Now moving on to our sewing machine, just like we said earlier on, we stated earlier on, 5.5 inches, which is the length of your darts. And of course, you'd go ahead to, basically divide 1 inch into 2, which is 0.5 inch for both sides, connect it all the way down. Moving on, you're going to fold your fashion fabric into 2 at the midpoint of that dart line. So you're going to fold it this way, ensuring that the 0.5 inch on both sides of your dart is well placed on each other this way. Please go ahead to take your time to arrange your pattern exactly how I am doing. Go ahead to make a slanted stitch all the way down to the 5.5 inches, which happens to be the length of your darts. So at this point, this is how you're going to go about in taking your darts for anything at all, be it a skirt, your bustier, whatever you're working with. This is how you'd go ahead to impute your darts. So you're going to be taking gradually all the way down, making a stitch in a slanted form and ensuring that your pattern is well laid or your fashion fabric is well laid. So carefully gradually take it all the way down, make your back stitch at that point. Now go in with your scissors and take off the excess straight at every given point. This is how you're going to impute your dart. Look at how beautiful our dart came out looking. Now flipping it to this point this way, you can see how well relaxed our dart is, well imputed on our waist region. This is definitely what you're going to achieve having followed through the process, and of course you've gotten it right. So now we're going to be replicating that same process for this other side as well. Pick from the midpoint of your dart line, ensure that it aligns perfectly the 0.5 inch on both sides. Now go in with your sewing machine and make a slanted stitch all the way down to the length of your dart. So with that being said, we'd go ahead to do that right away. So please pay attention to what I'm doing, like I said, and please go ahead to replicate same for yours. So if you have watched this video to this point, what are you waiting for? Kindly hit on the subscription button, like and follow for more of this related content. So like I said earlier on, please take it gradually in a slanted form. Make a slanted stitch all the way down to your dart length, which is exactly what I'm doing. Make a back stitch at that point and go ahead to cut out all your excess straights exactly how I am doing at this point. I hope you understand. So with this being done, you can see how well relaxed our dart is and how well imputed our dart is at that point. So this is definitely what you're going to achieve. Look at how beautiful our dart is, well imputed on both sides of our front pattern, which is exactly what you're seeing at this point. This is what the right hand side is looking like. This is so beautiful. So for your back skirt pattern, just like we did earlier on with the front, go ahead to fold the midpoint of your dart line, and like we did earlier on, go ahead to make a stitch in a slanted form from that 0.5 inch down to the 5.5 inch, which happens to be the length of your dart. So I won't have to say much. Just sit back and watch while I take you through the process of imputing my dart for the remaining part of my fashion fabric and lining. So having imputed our basic dart for all the sides of our fabric, both for our fashion fabric and our lining, now you'd go in with your hot iron and iron it down this way. Having done that, like I said earlier on, we've gone ahead to hold down our dart for the lining part of our skirt pattern, which is basically what you're seeing here. Having gone ahead to basically make your ironing, now you're going to bring back the front pattern together, the lining part of your front pattern and the fashion fabric of your front pattern. Please go ahead to place your fabric front to front pattern, which is right side to right side, which is basically what I'm doing at this point for both my lining and fashion fabric. So this point right here is the point which you'd get to understand the reason why we eliminated 1.5 inches off from our lining, which is exactly what you're seeing at this point. So at this point, you're going to drag down the lining side, which is the full skirt length of your lining point, to the full skirt length of your fashion fabric, which is exactly what you're seeing. And you're going to go ahead to match it up together, and you're going to be holding it down with pins. So by the time we join it, we're going to drag it all the way up, and you would see that the 2 inches has been successfully folded in, which is basically the seam allowance for our skirt folding. I hope you understand. But in case you do not, don't worry, as we progress, you'd get to understand this better. So as we were before, please go in with your pins and hold it down. Gradually take it all the way around. So having held down all the sides with your pin, now the next thing you're going to do is, remember we took out 1.5 inches off from our lining. So the 0.5 inch left, we're going to use it to join both our fashion fabric and our lining together at that point, to basically make it 2 inches, which is our folding allowance at that point. So just like we did earlier on with the front pattern, on our back pattern would go ahead to replicate that same process. Right side to right side, place it right side to right side, which is this. Now go ahead to drag it all the way down, just like we did with the front pattern, and gradually go in with your pins, spin it all the way around, and you're going to be making a top stitch of 0.5 inch at that point to hold down both your fashion fabric and your lining. So at this point, we've gone ahead to hold down both our fashion fabric and our lining with a top stitch of 0.5 inch. That is it for our front pattern, and this is it for our back pattern as well. So at this point, the next thing we'd go ahead to do is, we're going to keep our back pattern aside while we work on the front pattern. So on our front pattern, please carefully pay attention. Now at this point, remember at the full length of our skirt, we took out 1.5 inches, and joining it all together would give us 2 inches in total. So we're going to drag it. The waist side of your fashion fabric must align to the waist side of your lining, which is basically what I just did at this point. Now you're going to go in with your measuring tape, which is basically this. Remember, our skirt folding allowance was 2 inches. So at this point, we'd go ahead to take off that 2 inches, and the only way we can do that is by folding it in, which is basically what you're seeing here. Please go ahead to measure out 2 inches. Ensure it is up to 2 inches, and it is exactly 2 inches for both sides of your front pattern at your skirt full length, which is what you're seeing at this point. Having gotten the 2 inches, we're going to go in with our pins to hold it down on both sides. Ensure, like I said, that it is 2 inches on both sides. It is very, very important and crucial. You do not want to shorten the length of your skirt, and you do not want to have a shortage at the same time. I hope you understand. So just go in with your pins and hold it down on both sides. So having held down all your sides with your pin, now you're going to be making a stitch of 0.5 inch all the way up on both sides, and you're going to be replicating that same process for your back pattern as well. So I've gone ahead to make a stitch of 0.5 inch on both sides, which is exactly what you're seeing at this point. So now flipping it to the lining point, you can see how well laid all those points are. We've gone ahead to hold it down with 0.5 inch on both sides, and same is applicable with our back pattern as well. So we've basically gone ahead to sew it down with 0.5 inch. So like I said earlier, ensure that that point is on fold, a folding of 2 inches, which was your basic folding allowance. So at this point, you're going to go in with your scissors and you're going to make a notch at that point. So on both sides of that 2 inches folding, please go ahead to make a notch on both the front pattern and your back pattern, which is basically what I'm doing. Having done that, gradually flip it to the right hand side, go in with your scissors and poke out those points. Ensure it is well relaxed. Just take your time gradually and flip it to the right hand side, which is basically what I did. And at this point, you can see that our 2 inches folding allowance for our skirt has been well eliminated. Don't worry, at this point, we're going to be holding it down with a stitch and would go ahead to take off the excess that we have at that point. So I'm going to flip the wrong side, the right hand side rather, of my back pattern as well, and this is what it is looking like. Please go in with your iron, go ahead to open up the seam lines this way and press open the seam. Just go ahead to iron it properly on all the side, both for your front pattern and your back pattern. So I've gone ahead to iron down all the sides. You can see how well relaxed and how flat all the points is looking. Ironing is a very important part of your sewing. You must go ahead to iron at every point while sewing. It is very important and crucial. So at that point, being my back pattern, you can see my bump region, which is my butt lift contour, sitting pretty at that point. So having done that, you're going to go in with your sewing machine and you're going to be holding down both your fashion fabric and your lining at your waist region. Please go ahead to hold it down using a stitch of 0.5 inch on both sides, both for your front pattern and your back pattern. At the waist point, go ahead to hold it down. So at this point, we've gone ahead to hold it down and we've gone ahead to trim out all the excesses that we have on the waist region, and you can see how beautiful this came out looking. So we're going to keep the front pattern aside. Now please kindly take note, we have the two sides of our back region. We have the butt lift contour point, which happens to be where your zipper allowance point is seated at. So on that point being your zipper allowance point, we're going to be attaching our zip. So to do that, remember, like I said, we have the 2 points, your side front, and of course your zipper allowance point for your back pattern. Now at the zipper allowance point, which happens to be where your butt lift contour is imputed, which is that point right there, I am going to go ahead to take off my zipper allowance, which I did imputed at my zipper. So at my zipper point, I did imputed 2 inches and I'm going to be taking that 2 inches all the way round. So you're going to be following out the curve. Just go ahead to impute your 2 inches, 1 inch. It totally depends on your zipper allowance that you did imputed at that point. But before we go ahead to proceed on, now you'd have to equally take note of your hip point, which happens to be where your butt lift contour was imputed from. So to do that, place your tape and measure out the distance between your waist to your hip point plus 0.5 inch, which is your joining allowance for your waist region. And gradually from that point, go ahead to take out your 2 inches zipper allowance following the curve that you have on that bump region. Having done that, you're going to go in with your chalk and you're going to be connecting all those points into each other to form your butt lift contour at that point, which we had already imputed on our pattern, which was transferred into our fashion fabric. So with this right here, once you go ahead to basically impute your zipper, you would not lose the shape of your butt lift contour at that point. I hope you understand. Now for the length of my zipper, I am going to place my tape and come down by 10 inches, which happens to be 1 inch below my hip point. At that point, I'm going to make a back stitch and take it all the way down, leaving the other point, which is my waist region, to that 10 inches open for the fixing of my zipper. But then again, to be on the safer side, especially as a beginner, you're going to go ahead to make a stitch following that curve that you have imputed to eliminate your zipper allowance, and go ahead to iron it, so that once you basically take off the seam lines of that point, the crease line would serve as a guide for the input of your zipper. I hope you understand. So I've gone ahead to join it with the 2 inches, and I've gone ahead to press open the seam lines with my hot iron, which is basically what you're seeing. And at this point, you can see my butt lift contour already taking a very beautiful shape at that point. This is very important and crucial. You do not want to lose the shape of your curve for your butt lift contour at your butt point. I hope you understand. So I've gone ahead to iron it, and you can see how beautiful this point is already looking. Look at how our butt lift contour is sitting very pretty at that point. So this is exactly what I was trying to say. The ironing is definitely going to allow the crease line to be visible and clear, so that once you go ahead to rip your seam lines, you would see that that point will serve as a guide. And you can see how beautiful my butt lift contour rather is seated beautifully at that point. So with that being said, like we did initially, we're going to go ahead to measure out the length of our zip. So go ahead to place your tape from your waist point, chalk down 10 inches, which is exactly what I did at this point. So I told you earlier on, for your zipper, you're going to be marking 1 inch below your hip point, and that would serve as the length of your hip, which is exactly what I did at this point. So having done that, now you're going to go ahead to make a back stitch at that point. Go ahead to make a back stitch over and over again at that point. Having done that, you're going to go in with your seam ripper, and you're going to rip from your waist point down to that point which you imputed your back stitch. And now you'd go ahead to basically impute your zipper at that point. So I've gone ahead to open up this point with my seam ripper. Like I said earlier on, please, you're not going to be imputing any slit for this skirt. This is a short skirt. You do not have any need for the slit. I'm gonna head to attach my zipper. You can see how beautiful this point is. So please take note. On the zipper, we left 0.5 inch on the both sides of the zipper. Reason being that we'd have to go ahead to join our band on that point, and we need that 0.5 inch for the joining of our band before we go ahead to complete the joining of our zipper. Now moving forward, we're going to bring back the front pattern of our pattern, which is basically what you're seeing at this point. Now you're going to align it perfectly on both sides, and you're going to go in with your pins and hold it down. Please ensure that your pattern is well laid for both your front pattern and your back pattern. Your fashion fabric, to be precise, is well laid. Ensure all the points aligns perfectly, the full length, the hip point, the waist point. It is very important and crucial, which is exactly what I did at this point. Now to shape your skirt, you're going to place your tape from your waist point and come down by the distance between your waist to your hip point. So remember, we added 0.5 inch at our waist region. So instead of marking the distance between my waist point, which is 9 inches, I'll go ahead to mark 9.5 inches. On this other side, place your tape from your waist point and chalk down the distance between your waist to your hip point. Having done that, remember, for my basic side seam allowance, I did imputed 2 inches. I'll take that 2 inches on my waist point, hip point, and skirt full length, which is basically this. With the reintroduction of my slightly curved ruler, I'm going to connect from my hip point up to my waist point this way. And with the reintroduction of my straight ruler, I am going to be connecting from my waist point, from my hip point rather, down to my skirt full length, which is basically what you're seeing at this point. So this is the easiest and the simplest way of shaping out your skirt. This is very beautiful. This is very easy and beginner friendly. Now for this other part, mark 2 inches on your waist point, your hip point, and 2 inches at your skirt full length, which is basically this. Just like we did earlier on, go in with your slightly curved ruler, connect from your waist point down to your hip point, which is this, and still with the reintroduction of your straight ruler, go in with your straight ruler, connect from your waist point down to your skirt full length, which is this. Having done that, please go in with your stitch and go ahead to hold it down on both sides with your sewing machine. So I've gone ahead to hold down both sides, shaping out the 2 inches all the way down at this point. So with this being done, we're going to open up our seam and we're going to be ironing it all the way around. So I've gone ahead to iron and press open all the seam lines, and you can see how beautiful this point is is taking a very beautiful shape. Look at how the bum region, which is our butt contour, is sitting very pretty on the back side. Look at how the waist flows to the hip and to the full length point. Look at our waist point sitting very pretty at that point. So with that being said, we'd go ahead to impute or attach our band at this point. So to attach our band, we're going to go ahead to fold our fabric into two. So to do that, we're going to ensure that the seam allowance of both sides matches perfectly. Now fold your fabric into two this way. Ensure that the two seam line touches each other perfectly this way. With that being said, we're going to go ahead to, basically measure out the front circumference. So half of the front circumference from our waist point down to the midpoint this way. Just go ahead to measure it out. So what I have at that point, I'm going to go ahead to, basically highlight it at that point. So with this measurement right here, it means that half of my front waist circumference equals 9.75. So half of my waist circumference for my front pattern equals 9.75. Now for my back pattern, I'll go ahead to open up my zipper, which is exactly what I'm doing. And we're going to be taking the measurement from the zipper allowance all the way down to the side seam. So please watch what I'm doing. Go ahead to measure out from the side, from your zipper allowance down to the midpoint of that joining line. Go ahead to chalk down half of your back waist circumference. So my back waist circumference, half of it equals 11.25. So with that being said, I'm going to keep this aside while we go ahead to cut out our band. So I'm going to be using this pattern paper for the drafting of my band. Please kindly take note. The width of my band is going to equal 2 inches. So yours could be 1 inch. It could be 1.5 inches. It totally depends on your preference. So kindly take note. My front waist circumference equals 9.75. My back waist circumference equals 11.25. Remember that this pattern has to be on fold. But however, mine isn't on fold. Once I transfer it into my fashion fabric, I would ensure that point is on fold. Having rolled out your straight line, now go ahead to divide this pattern into two by placing your tape from the starting line to the end. Go ahead to fold it into two and go ahead to chalk down the midpoint of that line. Now going with your straight ruler and mark out your straight line at that midpoint, which is this. So having gotten the two lines basically, now remember, we're going to label our pattern. So this right here is my front, half of my front waist point, and this right here is half of my back waist point. So having labeled our pattern, now bringing back our measurements that was required, we're going to be imputing our client's half of our front waist circumference, and we're going to be imputing half of our client's back waist circumference. So on the front waist circumference, just like we labeled our pattern, we're going to be imputing that circumference on the front waist point. So you're going to be starting your measurement from that point for your front waist point. Mine is 9.75. I would go ahead to chalk it down at that point. Now for our back waist point, remember, all your measurements start from that line that demarcates the front waist point from the back waist point. Go ahead to chalk down 11.25, which happens to be half of my client's waist circumference. Having done that, having imputed the 2 points, now we're going to be coming up at that point by 0.5 inch. So on your front waist point, go ahead to come up at that point by 0.5 inch, which is this. And now at the back waist point as well, we'd go ahead to replicate that same process. But before we do that, we're going to go in with our slightly curved ruler, connecting from that point, and we're going to be blending it all the way in. Please watch the way my slightly curved ruler is being placed, and do go ahead to replicate same for yours. So having gotten our first curve, which happens to be our front waist curve, remember, like I said, this is the front and this is the back. So this pattern has to be on fold. Your band has to be on fold. Don't worry, once I transfer this into my fashion fabric, I'll ensure that point is on fold. Now for the back pattern, remember we divided our half of our client's waist circumference for our back pattern by 2. Chalk it down on that point, come up by 0.5 inch as well. Now with the reintroduction of your slightly curved ruler, connect from that 0.5 inch blend it all the way in. So basically just watch the way I'm placing my curve ruler, slightly curve ruler to be precise. It is very important and crucial. Having gotten those two curves, now we're going to be imputing the width of our band. So like I said earlier on, the width of my band happens to be 2 inches. Yours could be 1.5 inches, it could be 1 inch. It totally depends on your preference. So from that curve point for my front pattern, I'll go ahead to chalk down 2 inches, following all the curves down to the midpoint on both the front pattern and the back pattern, which is basically what I'm doing at this point. So having gotten the 2 inches band width, now would go ahead to take that measurement up to that 2 inches band width, which is this. Now we'd go ahead to replicate that same process for on our back pattern as well. Go ahead to take that 2 inches all the way up to this point as well. Having done that, now we'd go ahead to connect all the points into each other to form our basic curve. But before we do that, let's go ahead to make a straight line at this point to connect our front starting point, and a straight line at this point to connect our back starting point for our waistband. Having done that, with the reintroduction of my slightly curved ruler, I'm going to be connecting all the points into each other. So please basically watch what I'm doing. It is very important and crucial. Your slightly curved ruler and your straight ruler placement is very, very important. So with this being done, you've successfully drafted for yourself your basic band for your skirt pattern. Please go ahead to relabel your pattern. This right here is my front waist circumference, while this right here is my back waist circumference. Please go ahead to label it so that you do not get it mixed up or confused. Having done that, please go in with your scissors and go ahead to eliminate all the excess at every given point. Gradually take it all the way down this way. So having eliminated all the excesses, our band is ready. So with that being said, we'll go ahead to place it on our fabric and cut it out, which is exactly what you're seeing at this point. Remember, like I told you earlier, your band has to be on fold. Please ensure the front pattern or your front waist circumference is the point that is going to be on fold, which is exactly what you're seeing, and your back pattern is going to be open, which is exactly what you're seeing as well at this point. Remember, like I said, your pattern has to be on fold, especially the front pattern, while the back pattern will be open. So just like we were before, we'd go ahead to place back our band and we're going to pin it down. So for your band seam allowance, you're going to be adding 0.5 inch on both the upper region and the lower region, which is exactly what you're seeing. And you must ensure that you go ahead to cut out 2 pieces of your band. One is going to serve as the lining and the other as the fashion fabric. Please at this point, go in with your head stay and go ahead to layer it on top of both your fashion fabric and your lining. So at this point, I've gone ahead to infuse my head stay to both the band of the lining part of my band and the fashion fabric part of my band. So at this point, we'd go ahead to join our band. Go ahead to face the right side of your fashion fabric on the right side of your lining. So which is exactly what I did. I've gone ahead to label the upside and the downside. So we're going to be sewing the upside all the way down. So just go ahead to hold it down with a stitch of 0.5 inch. Gradually take it all the way around. Take note, you're sewing it on the upside of your band and not on the downside. So the downside is supposed to be attached to the lower part of your skirt pattern. I hope you understand. So just go ahead to take off the excess straight that you have at this point. So having done that, now go in with your scissors and make notches all the way around. So be careful so that you do not get to the seam lines. Just carefully make some notches all the way around, exactly how I am doing at this point. Having done that, you're going to open up the seam lines, which is the point you made your notches, and you're going to go in with your hot iron and press open that seam line. So we'll go ahead to do that and bring it back. So at this point, we've gone ahead to open up the seam lines and we've pressed open on both the inside out, and you can see how well relaxed those points is at that point. So with that being done, please pay attention. Now at this point, you're going to go ahead to decide the part that is going to be your lining and the point that is going to be your main fashion fabric. So like I said earlier on, so to do that, the point that I'm making this stroke is going to be the front side of my fabric, which is definitely going to be the front side of my band. So having done that, now on the point which we just marked down, or basically highlighted with our chalk, which happens to be the front side of our band, on the tip of that point you're going to fold in 0.5 inch. Please take note, you're going to fold down 0.5 inch and make a top stitch all the way down from the upside all the way down to that 0.5 inch to hold it down. So basically that is what I'm doing. Just pay attention, follow suit, and go ahead to replicate. Same for yours as well. With that being done, I'll go in with my scissors and take off all the excess straights that I have at every given point. With that being done for this part, having done that for this part, now we'll go ahead to replicate that same process for the other side as well. Like I said, please fold in 0.5 inch on the point or on the part of your band that is going to be facing the right hand side of your lower part of your skirt. I hope you understand. Don't worry if you do not understand. As we progress, you definitely get to understand better. Now at that point, just go in with your scissors and make some notches all the way around on that point. So having done that, now go ahead to flip it to the right hand side, which is basically what I'm doing. Now go in with your scissors and poke out that point. Ensure that you poke out that point. That's the reason why we basically made a notch at that point, so that that point can be well relaxed. It is very important. Just like we did earlier on, go ahead to flip it and go ahead to poke out that point. I'm going with your iron and iron flat your band, which is definitely what I did at this point. Now moving on, please take note of the notch points. Remember, before we went ahead to join those parts, we made some notches, and we made that notches by basically folding our band into two, and we made a notch at that point. Having made your notch on the band, now on the lower base of your skirt, you're going to equally fold it into two on the front pattern and make a notch at that point as well. So having done that, we'd go ahead to open up our zip on the back side. Now please take note and pay attention. Now, like I said, you're going to go ahead to determine the side that is going to be your lining and the side that is going to be your main fabric. Now, the point that is my lining, I would go ahead to align it to the lining side of the lower part of my skirt, and I would go ahead to pin it gradually all the way around. I hope you understand. Just go ahead to align the lining part of your band to the lining point of your skirt and gradually take it all the way around, just like I am doing at this point. So just take it all the way gradually, all the way around to this point, this way. Once you get to the zipper point, that's the more reason why I said you should leave 0.5 inch at that point. Now you're going to go ahead to basically hold it all the way around. So just like we did for the other point, now for this point we'll go ahead to replicate that same process as well. So carefully pin it all the way around, ensuring that your waist point aligns to the lining side of your band, which is exactly what I'm doing. Now once you get to this point, please open up the seam allowance at that point and carefully pin it all the way around, just as I am doing at this point. So you're going to carefully pin it all the way around to this point, this way. So now once you get to the zipper point, please go ahead to pin that point equally down all the way into your zipper allowance. So at this point, we've gone ahead to pin down all the required points. Now we'll go ahead to hold it down with a stitch. So we've gone ahead to hold it down with a stitch. As you can see, we've carefully concealed all those points by holding it down with a stitch. And you can see how beautiful the lining of both our band and the lining of the lower part of our skirt is looking at that point. So please pay attention. The notch point of both your band and that of the lower part of your skirt, you're going to fold this part by 0.5 inch and you're going to overlap it on the notch of the initial joining which you had for your band on the lining parts. Having done that, you're going to further fold it again by 0.5 inch. So ensure that as you're folding, remember the first joining that we did, which was our lining joining. Now you're going to be folding 0.5 inch on the front side of your fashion fabric for your band. You're going to fold it and place it on top of that already joined part for our lining. I hope you basically understand what I'm trying to say. So just watch what I'm doing. Fold it by 0.5 inch, place it on top of the other part, and basically pin it all the way around, which is exactly what you're seeing at this point. And you can see how beautiful and neat it is looking from the inside. Ensure that your fabric is not stuck at any point. All the points is well relaxed and well pinned down. You're going to be doing that for this other part as well. So we've gone ahead to pin down all the sides. Having done that, now we'll go ahead to make a stitch very close to the seam. So you're going to be making a stitch all the way around. Look at how well pinned all the sides is. Now please pay attention. You're going to be making a stitch very close to the edge of that band and take it all the way around. Now moving on to our sewing machine. So please take note, like I said, on the folded part of your band, which is that 0.5 inch that you fold in at that point, you're going to be making a stitch very close to that point. And you must ensure that as you're making the stitch, your fabric or your lining is not stuck at any point. You need to be very careful. So please just sit back and watch what I'm going to be doing at this point, and do go ahead to replicate same. So ensure that your stitch line is very close, and carefully take out your pins while making your stitch. Ensure that it is very close so that your stitch line rather would be nearly invisible once you're basically done sewing down all the parts of your band. I hope you understand. So you're going to be taking this gradually all the way around. So at this point, I won't have to say much. Just sit back and watch while I take you through that process. Having held down our band with a closed stitch, you can see how beautiful this came out looking. Look at how well relaxed our band is. So at this point, we'd go ahead to complete our zipper. So just go ahead to pin it down, hold it down with your pins this way. And at this other point as well, just go ahead to arrange it and hold it down with your pins as well. So as you're pinning, please ensure that it is enough to accommodate your waist circumference by taking the measurement, which is exactly what I did at this point. So this is enough for my waist circumference. Having done that, now you're going to go in with your sewing machine and go ahead to hold that point down with a stitch all the way around this way. So having done that, now we'd go ahead to take off our excess straights. Just carefully cut out all your excess straights at those points. With that being done, you'd go ahead to replicate that same process for this other part of your zipper. Like I said earlier on, go in with your sewing machine and make a top stitch at that point to hold down the remaining side of your zipper. Just like we did earlier on, go in with your scissors and take off your excess straights. Carefully take it all the way off this way. So with this being done, you can see how beautiful our zip is well imputed at that point, how the waist points align perfectly on both sides. Having done that, you're going to go ahead to trim off the excess of your zipper at that point, which is basically what I'm doing at this point. With that being done, now you're going to fold it this way. Please pay attention to what I'm doing. Fold your zipper in this way and fold it all over again this way. So that is to conceal the leftover at that point. Having done that, go in with your sewing machine and make a top stitch at that point. Just make a top stitch at that point carefully. With that being done, go in with your scissors and take off your excess straights this way. So having eliminated all our excess straights, you can see how well folded that point is. So we've successfully concealed that edge. Now for these other parts, we'd go ahead to replicate that same process. Fold your zipper all the way in and make your folding at that point all over again. Now going with your sewing machine and go ahead to make a stitch at that point. Just make a little bit of a stitch at that point this way. Having done that, go in with your scissors and trim off your excess straights all the way around. You want your pattern to come out as clean as possible, and you can see how beautiful this point is looking. Our well concealed zipper point at that point, and you can see our band well imputed at this point. So at this point, we've gone ahead to press down our band, and you can see how beautiful and perfect everything came out looking. Please go ahead to ensure that you basically iron down your band and your entire pattern on every side. So we've gone ahead to do that, and you can see our butt lift contour sitting beautifully out the side flows evenly from the waist to the hip and the skirt full length. And voila, look at how beautiful and perfect our short pencil skirt with a butt lift contour came out looking. Isn't this pretty? Achalugo is giving everything it should give at this point. This is very beautiful. I'm actually just dancing for you guys to see how beautiful this turned out. This is certainly what you'd want to achieve, having followed through the process, and of course you've gotten it right. So if there's any point in this video that you do not understand, please do well to use the comment section. I'll be more than willing to answer all of your questions. Thank you, and I'm going to be seeing you on my next video. Bye.